on. Okay, this hangout on air is live. I don't know how many people we have here. Let's see. First of all, Phil, what a pleasure to have you here.
Yes, me too. It's hot in California. It's like 110 degrees.
Well, it's hot in Portugal too. If anyone is here and spoke with us last week, I was in Brazil and now I'm in Portugal. I'm in this festival trying to get some producers to get interested in our film. Let's hope for the best. Send our thoughts and prayers as well. You never know. And so anyway, I just wanted to introduce you guys to Phil Zuckerman. One of the best interviews in the film. He's an author of a couple of books, Society Without a God and Living the Secular Life, which we will put a link here to anyone who is interested. Phil has been doing lots of research comparing societies in their taking their religiosities into consideration. Let's see what's the differences. We had a wonderful interview, which you could see. We could watch a couple of segments in our teaser, and then we had a specific clip released when we hit $25,000. So there you go. That was your participation in our celebration for this milestone. And well, to get started, I just wanted to ask Phil, what drove you to this sort of work? I mean, what put you within all the other professors of sociology to study specifically these differences between societies?
Jesus came to me in a dream. No.
Sorry, it happens all the time.
Yeah, he came to me in a dream. He had voodoo donuts, and he told me no. Let's see. I guess it really bothers me how my fellow Americans. There's two things. There's a deep hypocrisy and a deep misunderstanding. The hypocrisy is that those Americans who claim to be the most Christian are often the most immoral. They're the ones who love assault weapons. They are the ones who don't care about women's rights or gay rights or racism. They deny global warming. So the ones in this country that are I don't mean all Christians. I mean the evangelical conservative ones, the most Christian ones, the ones that take the Bible literally, all that shit. They're really immoral people, many of them, not all. And so that's the hypocrisy that drives me crazy. And then the misunderstanding is that so many of my fellow Americans think that that you have to have God in your society or in your culture, or else the society will fall apart. And anybody who's ever traveled, most Americans can't travel because they don't have most Americans can't afford to travel abroad. But if you go abroad and you go to other societies, you see that many of the most religious countries in the world are the most fucked up. And I mean, not to pick on Brazil, but I just saw something about the favelas and and this here you have Rio de Janeiro with this big fucking Jesus overneath, and what the hell? I mean, you would think God would be so happy that there's this giant Jesus that he would like bless all the people of Rio de Janeiro, but they're living in sewage and crime and filth. So
we just had a church collapsing in São Paulo a couple of days ago. So how come that?
It's so fucked. So, and then you go to countries where people are not so religious, Japan, Scandinavia, Marin County, California, and you see that life is pretty good. And I'm not arguing that religion is the only source of problems. No way. And I'm not arguing that secularism is the great golden phallus of solutions. I'm simply saying that I wanted to break the association. There's other reasons that societies do well. some do well and some do poorly. There's many reasons. But religion in Americans' minds is like so important. And I wanted to show them that it's just the correlation's not true. You don't have to have a religious society for the society to be good. And you can have a secular society that is still good. And in fact, if anything, the correlations go the other way. Now, why I was the first, I'm not the first one. There were others who have noted this. Why I so devoted my professional life to it, you would have to ask my therapist.
Well, I just wanted to address John here said he has all of your books in an ebook form. So, yeah.
Thanks, John.
There you go. And how do you see the situation now in the U.S.? First in the U.S., and then we talk about worldwide. How do you see the situation in the U.S. in the last couple of years regarding atheism and the perception of atheism, most of all? Because I have the impression that people are going to get a little bit surprised with the results in the next elections, because this is one of those statistics that I was using for my research, that atheists and non-believers in general are very rejected. But now these things it seems like it's changing a little bit. What do you think?
I think changing a little bit is the exact phrase. It is getting a little better. So it's slow, but for example, maybe 10 years ago, when Americans were asked by Pew, would they vote for someone for president who was, and they had a list, a woman, Latino, Black, Jew, Mormon, Baptist, gay, Muslim, all those things. And atheists, of course, came in last place, but it was something like 55% said they would not vote for an atheist for president.
Even if he was qualified, even if he or
right.
she was qualified, right? Yeah.
But then in the more recent one, which I believe was about 2 or 3 years ago, it was now at 49%. So atheists still came in last place, but you saw a slight, it went from 55 to 49. So it's still, you could say that's statistically insignificant, but I think it is an illustration of this slow growing acceptance of non-believers, of atheists, because more and more atheists are coming out. Bernie Sanders does not believe in God. He doesn't call himself an atheist, but it's very clear that he avoids, he'll never say that he believes in God. He'll say that his religion is helping other people, and you can read into that whatever you want. It's a very slick answer. But, I just think that the topic of atheism has, ever since the New Atheists with Dawkins and Hitchens and Harris, and since 9/11, so for the last 10 years, 12 years, atheism has been in the public conversation. Atheists are now being more included. I'll give you an example. Oh shit, I don't know. Oh, I was on a United Airlines airplane, and they had that magazine called Hemispheres. It's like, if you're flying in the airplane, you get that free magazine, and you can do the crossword puzzle and shit. And they always have articles. And this one was Oprah. It was an article by Reza Aslan, who's doing a show with Oprah about belief in America, and it charted the different, this is a Jew, this is a Christian, this is a Buddhist, this is a Muslim, and they included an atheist as one of the 7 or whatever, and they had this, young guy mountain climbing. So the fact that Oprah is including atheists in her canopy of believers shows that I think we are getting more and more accepted.
Well, just take Obama, for instance. I mean, Obama, if I'm not mistaken, was the first president of a very long line of presidents who did not say "God bless America" at the end of one of his speeches. He got a lot of hard time for it. Then he eventually said, I think it was in a State of the Union address, when he said, well, we're a nation of Christians and Jews and Muslims and non-believers. And then when he said non-believers, people just went crazy. How dare he? But at least you have a president that for the first time, I think it's a very good sign. John here is asking, isn't the case that religious fundamentalists in the U.S. are a small but extremely vocal group?
Yeah, 100%. Well, small is it? Sociologically, what do you mean by small? Evangelicals, I would say, make up about 25%, roughly. Maybe it's 30, maybe it's 22. But I would safely say about 25% of the United States of the adult population identifies as evangelical, and that's a big chunk. So it's a minority, so it's small in that sense, but it's a big chunk, but their power is far more is far stronger than their numbers. So, for example, even though they're maybe 25% of the U.S. population, their representation in the Congress and the Senate
Exactly. It's
is way higher.
disproportional.
Disproportional. In the military, way higher. So, just
Well, and when you look at non-affiliates, I mean, non-affiliates now are 23%.
at
I
least,
mean,
that's the low end. So yeah, non-affiliated Americans, non-religious Americans are at least 23%, but you don't have even 1% of Congress and the Senate identifying as non-believers or non-religious. Maybe now and then you get one or two here or there. Peter Stark, I believe, but he's no longer in. There's maybe one or two here. That many of them are non-believers, but they just can't come out and say it. So I do think that the evangelicals and the fundamentalists are a minority of Americans, but they have a disproportionate amount of power in some areas. I would argue that they do not have a disproportionate amount of influence in culture. For example, movies, television, they are very marginal, and that is why I think they feel marginalized, and so on and so forth.
you know what, John, you're on the money. Their power is disproportionate. And Kevin, I'm going to ask you a question in just a couple of minutes. I just wanted to ask you now what I did ask you during our interview, and I think it's a very interesting point, which is why, when you compare, for instance, England, which is a Christian country, a Christian nation,
Yeah.
the Queen is the head of the state,
Yeah.
but there, if any politician running for any kind of office mentions God in the election, he gets laughed at. On the other hand, in the United States, if you don't mention God, there's a good chance you won't get elected. So why is it, and I know there's a lot of reasons, but let's try to get the main ones. Why is it that the United States is the sort of the only developed country that is still clinging to their religiosity as much as they are?
Oh, that's a good question. And that goes to the sort of history of how the United States was formed. We're a new nation. The early settlers from Europe were Christian fundamentalists. The Puritans wanted to create a more religious society than back in England, not less. They create the early settlers before the Constitution was ratified, in the early days, they created a theocracy. So there's a lot of factors at play. Our early founding was strongly Christian fundamentalist. Of course, more waves of immigrants came in, and that was quelled a bit. So by the time the country was officially formed, it was not a theocracy. We had a strong movement against that. But every wave of immigrants clung to their religion for security, identity, and comfort. We know that's always the case when immigrants immigrate. It's a very disorienting process, and religion can be a comfort. We have a very unequal society, a huge gap between rich and poor, and so unequal society with very low welfare. So we don't have a strong state welfare like they do in Europe. So religion still has a big role to play when people get cancer, when people can't have no child care, when people are out of work. They turn to
they're afraid to lose their jobs. Yeah,
they turn to religion. So when you have a lot of highest poverty rate of any industrialized democracy in the world, highest murder and crime rates of any industrialized democracy in the world, lowest welfare, highest incarceration rates. This country is a tough country to live in, and people turn to religion way more because they need it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Just wanted to acknowledge a few people here. John, you're participating a lot. Thank you very much. Kevin has a very good point in which he says religious moderation gives some protection to extremists by making criticizing someone's religion off limits, though. And it's the same with the Muslims, right? Bill Maher and Sam Harris talked about them a lot. I mean, the first that sometimes the moderates are not really that moderate if you don't follow that religion. Even the moderates can be seen as extremists to some extent. But isn't the sort of this division and then the moderates standing up against any sort of criticism or analysis of religion, sort of giving shelter to the fundamentalists?
I struggle with that. I don't know. I think in most movements in history, whether they're nationalistic movements, political movements, religious movements, secular movement, whatever it is, I mean, there's always people that are more extreme. And so, for example, you in socialism there were Stalinists and then there were social democrats. So are you saying are you saying does Bernie Sanders give comfort and support to Kim Jong-il? I mean, they both claim to be socialists. It's like, no, Bernie Sanders is very different from Kim Jong-un or Kim Jong-il. I don't know. I don't believe that, Olof Palme, the socialist leader of Sweden, was he giving comfort to Joseph Stalin? I think religious moderates should be treated as friends and allies. These are people that value democracy, that value tolerance. They just happen to believe in fairy tales, but I don't care if they believe in fairy tales as long as they don't want to stone people to death.
Some people believe in astrology.
Absolutely. Some people, exactly. So I don't agree with Sam Harris that the moderates going to give shelter and comfort to the extremists. If you took that logically, then that would mean I must be a supporter of Hugo Chavez because I'm left-leaning, and I just don't believe that. So I think there's good types of religion and bad types of religion, and the good ones we should support. And the thing with Islam is you just have to be careful because it's so closely tied to people's sense of identity as a people. So when they hear Islam, they don't know that you're critiquing the Quran. They think you're critiquing their aunt or their uncle or their mother or their father. So you just have to be very careful. You have to say, look, I'm not critiquing Muslim people. I'm critiquing this article of Sharia. I'm critiquing this part of the Quran. I'm critiquing this leader who does things in the name of Islam. If they can't hear that, well, fuck it, then what can you do? But I think we have to be careful with, especially right now in the United States, I was driving from Oakland to Los Angeles yesterday on I-5 for 6 hours, and I just listened to right-wing talk radio the whole time, and it was all anti-Muslim in the most kind of fascistic, the way Germans would talk about Jews, the way Hutus would talk about Tutsis, like it was just these Muslims are evil. And so we have to understand that the right in this country is using that rhetoric. So we have to be very careful. I'm very critical of Islam as a religious system. I'm very critical of Sharia as a legal system. I'm very critical of the Quran as a holy book. But we have to be very careful when we criticize Islam, we have to be very careful that we mean what we mean. And we have to say, I'm very critical of this section of the Quran, which says blah, blah, blah. And we have to be careful not to say Muslims in as a group.
And I just wanted to acknowledge, Alex and Kevin and Joe, they're participating. I just wanted to, just since we touched on communism, and sometimes it comes up when people want to challenge atheist views and, how we're mostly peaceful people and this and that we don't stand for anything in particular. So therefore, we're not for defending ideologies that kill people, for instance. And they say, well, how about Stalin? How about this and that? So just because we had a great talk about that on the film. So how do you respond to people when they say, well, but communists, they were atheists and they killed like millions and millions of people. How do you respond to that?
I say it's true. They were atheists and they killed millions of people and they were fucking evil. And it sucks. And any secularist that thinks, religion's all bad and secularism's all good, that's a simplistic view of the world, and you need to wake up and realize it's more complicated. So the first thing I would say is, you can't, I think it's wrong if we try to deny it. Oh, well, they didn't kill in the name of atheism, but Muslims can kill in the name of Islam and Christians kill in the name of Christianity. There is some truth to that, but you're splitting hairs.
But at the same time, they replaced religion with their ideology. So, they took religious holidays and turned them into communist festivals. So in a sense, they didn't take out religion. They put something in its place, and that something that stood in its place was the reason why so many people got killed. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes and no. I mean, they replaced the celebrations with secular celebrations, but they didn't give it a new god. They took supernaturalism out of the equation. There was no worship of a supernatural deity. And so we have to acknowledge that, yes, atheism, the denial of a god, was a very central pillar of the communist regime, as it was for other communist regimes, not just in the Soviet Union, but in Albania, in Cambodia. So this is very painful. We have to acknowledge it. But what I would say to people is, now, wait a minute. There have been many evil regimes that have been religious, explicitly so. You can go back through history, or you can just look at the Ayatollah or the popes who did all kinds of evil, or Christian leaders today in parts of Africa, in parts of Latin America, who tortured people, who killed people, who exterminated people. I know you're not supposed to do this on the internet, but the Nazis had God as a central part of their motto was God is with us. When you became a Nazi officer, you had to swear your oath to God first. So it's like, come on. The bottom line is religious people are capable of evil, and atheists are capable of evil too. So what you have to look at is, in my opinion, you can't just look at these evil people from history and, okay, let's stack up the bodies. Did the Catholic Church kill more people? Did the Soviets kill more people? Rwanda was the most Catholic country in the 1990s, and look what happened in Rwanda. So rather than stack up bodies under leaders, I say let's look at societies or groups of people and compare them in terms of daily life. And what you will see is that today, where there is a high proportion of non-believers, daily life is more safe and more humane. And in countries where there's a high proportion of believers, daily life is more crime-ridden and precarious and dangerous. And that's just a sociological fact.
And since you started your work to this day, what would you say are the nations that are striving the most, or that are inflicting change, or have perceivable change, in the sense that, okay, these countries, they are becoming less religion, and we can see that this is a reflection of this and that, or the other way around. This country is going to war. Is there some kind of connections that we can make, but not in a static situation, but things improving or getting worse?
Okay, so I can tell you where we are seeing religion going up in some societies, and I can tell you where we are seeing religion going down in some societies. What I can't do is immediately tell you if that's improving things or making things worse, or that would be that analysis would take more time than I could do off the top of my head.
Sure.
But so for example, some societies that have been traditionally very religious, like Ireland, has always been the most religious country in Europe, is now becoming very secular rapidly. Israel was founded by secular Jews and was very secular for the first 30 or 40 years of its existence. It is now becoming way more religious very rapidly. And that's clearly a result of the threats all around it and the need religion provides people with cultural defense and a need for security and comfort, and it's linked to nationalism. Wherever nationalism is strong, religion tends to be strong too. Usually, not always. There's some exceptions. Some countries that, for the first time, we're seeing secularism rising in South America, slowly, but in some societies like Chile and Argentina, it's going up, up and up and up. And I'm trying to think where else we're seeing it. It's been going down in Japan for quite some time, religion. So yeah, those off the top of my Canada, religion's going down fast in Canada. It's going up a bit in some former Soviet countries or Soviet occupied countries like Moldova. So it's hard to say.
We just want to acknowledge that we have a Pastafarian here, and he's sending his blessings. May his noodly appendage touch you, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, please, you will feel blessed, please. If you guys have any questions, please send it over. We'll try to address them. I wanted to talk to something with you that we discussed briefly in our interview, and I'm gonna be dealing with it a lot more in the film, which is comparing, well, I know you've spent some time in Scandinavian countries, and Norway is supposed to have like the best prison system in the world. On the other hand, the worst prison system in the world was voted last year as being Brazil, and there's one prison in Pernambuco was which is like we see it in the news. It's like you even get cannibalism going on in there. So, would you say that the prison system of a society can reflect its level of religiosity in a sense that maybe it's an analogy to purgatory or to hell? So instead of trying to recuperate criminals, we just want to punish them for punishment's sake.
Oh yeah, I think that long ago there was an early founding sociologist named Harriet Martineau. She was from England. She was raised a Unitarian. She became secular as she got older, and she said that the best way to study a society's health and well-being is to look at its prisons, and that will tell you everything about a society. Now you're asking if this reflects their kind of their religious worldview. I think yes, in a certain degree. If you believe that it's all about reward and punishment and heaven and hell, then yeah, your prisons are going to be like, you're going to make them like hell, so people are punished. On the other hand, if you don't believe in heaven and hell, and you believe in empathy, and you believe in helping people, and you believe that all humans are capable of good and evil depending on circumstances and genes and all these other factors, then you're going to make your prisons as humane as possible, because you realize that this is the only world there is, and we have to treat people the way we want to be treated.
I'm gonna get a question here from Alex. Isn't it funny that the Puritans left England due to religious persecution, and then they decided to religiously persecute other people once they arrived in the U.S.?
It is very funny. I'm not a historian because I'm more interested in living people than dead people, but I do think that that they actually weren't fleeing persecution. That's the myth we are told, because it makes us feel good, like, oh, our forefathers and mothers were fleeing persecution. I don't think they were being persecuted in England. They just thought England wasn't being Christian enough. They were like, you're a bunch of sinners. We're going to go where we can be more religious. So I don't know that for sure, but I don't think the Puritans were being persecuted. I think they just thought that the Church of England was corrupt and they didn't want to be part of it.
Let me ask you something. We had a big response to that clip that we released when you were comparing, soldiers and their sergeant to morality. Like people that believe in God and follow the scriptures, they end up by doing so giving up on their ability to discern right from wrong. And then there's another part that people didn't watch yet, in which you mentioned someone that came up to you after a speech and said, well, you've been talking about atheism and secularism, but I love women. You know which one I'm talking about, right? So can you make the link between these two stories?
Yeah, I was asked to do a debate at a evangelical church up in Northern California. I think it was called Adventure Church. You can actually watch the debate online. It was me against this guy named David Marshall. They invited me, so I went to this massive mega church, and we debated about religion and civil society and secularism and whatnot. And then after the debate, I was in the lobby of the big, massive church, and this man, for whatever reason, he happened to be Eastern European, so he had this thick accent, and he said, he came up to me and goes, very good talk, but I have to tell you, I love women. And if I could, I would rape every woman. And the only reason I do not rape women is because the God is watching me. If there was no God, I would be out raping women. And I mean, what this means is first of all, if you love women, you would not want to inflict harm on them. I mean, that's number one. So his whole idea of what it means to love is totally damning.
And he said that proudly,
very proud,
as a way of like, he's doing propaganda for religion. I mean, it's so good, it keeps me from raping.
Yeah, and so what he's basically saying is, I I don't care about other people's suffering. So he's saying it wouldn't bother me if someone was screaming and crying and in pain and bleeding. That wouldn't affect me. The only thing that would affect me is my daddy upstairs who might beat me with a belt, or my sergeant who might shoot me or court-martial me. So that is an immoral person who has no conscience. I mean, the thing that keeps me from hurting someone else is I would feel bad. It would feel bad for me to hurt someone else. When I'm in the market and I accidentally hit a kid in the head with my elbow, I feel, oh, I'm so sorry. I feel bad that I hurt you. I don't think like, oh, now I'm, fuck you, kid, but oh, I'm going to get punished by God. So basically that man I've heard this from so many Christians. Oh, the only thing that keeps me from stealing is God. The only thing that keeps me from killing you is God. Well, then you're admitting you have no morals. You're admitting you have no empathy. You're admitting you don't care about the suffering of other people. So you are actually...
And it's pretty much understandable that they think atheists will be immoral, because they've been using this crutch for so long that they cannot...
That's right. Well, it's a projection. They're seeing, if you say, I don't believe in God, then they're like, well, you must be immoral then. What keeps you from being moral? Because they themselves have no moral compass or conscience. So that, I strongly believe that the only reason people associate atheism with immorality is because they're projecting their own immorality. The only thing, they don't understand their inner morality. They think it comes from God. So they think, oh, you must not be moral if you don't have a God. And it's actually the opposite. If you're only moral because you believe in God, you actually are an immoral human being.
I agree. Let me just acknowledge some people here. Okay, John. So religious fundamentalists have immature morality. Yeah, I think we can agree on that, right? I mean, I wouldn't even say they have immature morality. They gave up on it. I mean,
yeah, I think I agree.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it all depends on the fundamentals of your religion, specifically. So depending on that religion, your fundamentals are going to be, in our view, more or less moral. In their view, it's always moral, if God is commanding.
There was a psychologist and ethicist, Lawrence Kohlberg from Harvard, and he studied moral development in humans. And he did study that most children go through these various phases. And at the earliest, lowest, most childish phase, wrong and right are about like punishment. So the caller or the writer or the person is correct. That is a more childish, according to Lawrence Kohlberg's version. It's the lowest level of moral development. I write about it in my Living the Secular Life, but I agree with you as well that on a certain level, it's an abdication. It's a letting go, because morality is about choosing for yourself what is good, what is bad, what is wrong and right.
Sometimes it's not that easy. It takes hard work.
It's very hard work. And so the religious fundamentalist who just says, well, I just do what God tells me, they're taking the easy way out. They're saying, oh, I'm not going to make up my own mind.
Now, I just want to tell everybody I feel blessed because Jesus just spoke to me right now. So thank you, Jesus. This is Atheist Jesus. Hi, Alex. How are you? Yeah, so let me see. I have some, what's his name? Sorry, Jeffrey. We're talking about Latin America, so indoctrinated in Christianity. A year and a half ago, I had a life-threatening motorcycle accident in Honduras. At the hospital, they asked if I wanted to see a priest. I never laughed so hard. I inhaled the crap out of them with my reaction. So Latin America, what would you have to say specifically about Latin America? Because, it seems to me like I have some bits and pieces of other societies, it's a I don't know how to call it, mixed societies. But religiosity is so, I mean, Brazil is supposed to be like the largest Catholic country in the world. Yeah. But you see, this kind of trait in many other Latin American countries. Do you have like a analysis of that?
It's not my area of expertise. My quick response would be that the indigenous people of Latin America had strong religious beliefs. When the Spaniards came to colonize and the Portuguese came to colonize, they brought in Catholicism, which actually I think there was a blending and a mixing, because I think many Latin Americans really worship Mary, who is really a goddess from, it was easy to switch from this ancient goddess to the Mary goddess. But I don't know the history of religion in Latin America. I'm not an expert, but I just think it has to do with the culture. But I don't know enough about it. I don't know why. But we also see the standard correlations. Life is hard. There's a lot of inequality. There's been a lot of corrupt governments. So whenever you have a corruption and inequality and a hard life, people turn to religion. When things start to improve, you will see religion going down, for sure.
Yeah, Dave here says, while ideally a world without religion, God might be desirable, in reality, it might be better to try to coexist with the moderates, or we might have a lot of rapists running around. Uh,
I agree with
yeah, it's
I,
true.
I agreed with everything except, oh, I see what he's saying. Yeah, no, I'm all for making coalitions. Look, the most important thing to me is not what you believe, it's your behavior. If you want to believe in fairy tales, fine. If you want to believe in unicorns, God, what the fuck do I care? It only matters when you start to affect society, when you say that we can't teach evolution in school, when you want to say that we're going to go to war because God told you to, when you say we're not going to fight global warming because Jesus has green underwear, when you whatever, that's the problem. When you start to impose so I think if we find believers who share our vision of the world, who still celebrate science, who still promote education, who promote women's rights and gay rights and fight against racism and sexism and homophobia and want to fight global warming, hey, if you're religious, that's fine by me. And I think religion has a lot of good to it. I know a lot of good religious people. I know a lot of good religious congregations. So I don't think our goal should be to get, totally destroy religion off the face of the planet. What a fucking nightmare. I think we should have,
Yeah, religion doesn't make people good or bad, but just as atheism doesn't turn them bad as well. And this is what we're finding, us specifically with the documentary. I mean, not trying to prove that religion is bad, that God is bad. Everybody has their own opinion on that. But just just like we did with the map, when you talk about, we compare the states. I mean, we're not saying that religion or religiosity leads to more child abuse and poverty. We're just saying that, well, at least you get the least religious state. They should be, a jungle, and they're not. I wanted to ask you one thing, because we always compare atheists and gay people, and there's something you told me that many people approach you and say that it was harder to come out as an atheist than it was when they came out as gay. First of all, why do you think that happened? And if you see sort of if you see things getting better in that sense.
Okay, so I didn't do an actual survey, so it's purely anecdotal. But when I speak at conferences, the American Human Association, Freedom from Religion Foundation, whatever, I've often had gays and lesbians come to me and say, my family got more upset when they found out I was an atheist when they found out I was gay. They got, and even though that's anecdotal, Greta Christina, who's a leading secular activist and author and blogger and writer, has told me that and she's a lesbian in the Bay Area in San Francisco. She says the exact same thing, that people tell her as well, that their family was more upset that they came out that when they found out they were an atheist than gay and lesbian. So at least you have two people, me and Greta, hearing the same stories. So it's just anecdotal, but now why that is, I really haven't investigated, only other than to say that clearly in the United States, the acceptance and tolerance of homosexuality has increased. It's obviously not where it should be, and there's obviously tremendous violence against gays and lesbians and hatred and hostility still. But in certain cultures or subcultures or neighborhoods or parts of this country, it's more acceptable to the parents that their children are gay and lesbian. But somehow atheism has this symbolic weight of, you must be evil, you must be beyond repair and immoral. And that scares them, and they don't understand atheism. They think it just means evil. They think it means wicked. They think so. That's my best guess.
I just want to quote Alex here. I personally want religion to end, but I disagree with certain atheists that wish religion to be banned altogether, because when we are no better than the religious, who wouldn't be any more happier if they ban atheism altogether. And I remember something that you said in our interview, which is really, really interesting, which is secularism doesn't lead, because there's this whole thing now that atheists they want an atheist constitution and stuff like that. That secularism doesn't lead to atheism. Secularism leads to indifference.
Yeah.
And this is the whole struggle, right? Indifference from both sides,
Yeah.
correct? I mean, we shouldn't have a government that would enforce atheism, so we shouldn't ban religion, but at the same time, it shouldn't take sides with religion itself, or one religion in particular, which is even worse.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, religion should not be banned from the private world, people's homes, people's communities, people's churches. The only place that it should be banned from is if it involves my taxes. So, you should not, the government should not be using tax money to promote religion or fund it. And that's what the First Amendment of the Constitution said. The government shall not establish religion, nor shall it prohibit the free exercise thereof. I mean, the founding fathers got it right. What we advocate is a neutrality. Government should be neutral. Government should not be oppressing or banning religion, but it should not be supporting or indoctrinating or people into religion. It should be neutral. That is the heart of political secularism. Jeffersonian secularism is keep government and religion separate. Now the government should have its functions and religion can have its own private functions. And yes, anybody who says we should ban religion, that's a scary person to me, because you ban religion, well, guess who's going to be next,
Exactly. And you mentioned taxes, and there was something very interesting that we talked about as well, and I just wanted to link it to something else, which I mean, something that for years and years and years I haven't seen popping up in like Facebook feeds and stuff like that, and suddenly I started to see it a lot more at least, which is people questioning the tax exemption of religious institutions. At the same time, one of the reasons why you at least what you said to us, for United States to be so religious, is the fact that the church is not state sponsored, so it became sort of an enterprise. So how do you see that mixture when you have like free enterprise to build your own church and at the same time you have tax exemption?
Yeah, no, the tax exemption status is absurd, and it's not constitutional. It's wrong. It's billions of dollars a year to church. If a church wants to open up a little store and sell coffee and T-shirts, they pay no taxes. If the church wants to they pay no property taxes. The pastor doesn't pay taxes. I mean, this tax exempt status for religious groups is giving away billions of dollars and it's horrible and it's wrong and it violates the separation of church and state principle. But to be quite honest, I think this is why religious people never want the government to increase welfare, because if the government, has better hospitals and provides daycare and elder care and child care and job training, the churches will have no job to do. And they want people to give their money to the churches. They don't want their people to give their money to the government in taxes. So I actually think the reason that most religious people are taxes are bad, it's because they know it's competition. They want people giving their money to the churches and not to the government. So Michael, I only have time for one more. I'm almost out of time here. So
okay, I'm just going to ask you one thing. First of all, I mean, this actually two questions in one, but which is, do you see a change in that in the foreseeable future? And if you do see change, is it related to the millennials? I mean, this whole phenomenon of millennials and they're turning their back on religion in a much broader sense. I mean, you see that? I mean, you see that happening, the end of tax exemption, and does it have anything to do with millennials? And why are millennials turning their back on religion?
Millennials are the least religious demographic cohort in the history of the United States. Over 35% say they're not religious. We've never seen anything like this before in U.S. history. They are turning their backs on religion primarily because of the internet, because they don't have a problem with gays and lesbians, and religion does, and that's really turning a lot of them off. Those are the two primary reasons. The internet is creating not a friend of religion, and for many reasons, which I don't have time to get into here. I do in my book, but sorry for that. But I think the millennials, in terms of tax exemptions for churches, that is the bottom of the list. I don't think most Americans even know about the tax exemption for religion. I don't think they care. I mean, in terms of an agenda, I think that's a long, long way in the future. I think right now, millennials are way more concerned with rights of gays and lesbians, transgender rights, again, which religion has come out against, which is just going to kill religion in the future, global warming. I mean, I just think that millennials have more on their mind than tax exemption. And probably most of them would be like, who cares? Okay, so the churches get I don't think they know the numbers involved. Ryan Cragen, who's a professor in Florida, wrote an amazing article in Free Inquiry about a year ago where he talks about the actual monetary cost of tax exemption for religion, and he goes, line item by line item, billions of dollars. So recommend that.
Maybe tens of billions of dollars.
Oh, it's way out there. Yeah.
Well, guys, I just wanted to thank you all for joining us. Phil, thanks a lot. I mean, it's been a privilege and an honor to have you in the film and here as well. The link for his latest book is on the chat. I just wanted to let everybody know that our next guest is Aaron Ra. It's going to be on Thursday on 6 p.m. PST or PDT. And yeah, that's it. Thanks a lot, and I hope you guys come back for the next one. Phil, thank you. Have a good one, my friend.
Thank you so much. Good. Keep up the good work.
We will. Thanks a lot.